That's difficult. We got married in 1962 and bought a second-hand house to do up. And half of the way through that I realised that the work involved in doing something up to a highly standard was probably worse than building a new one. So at that stage I decided to build a new house. For myself, I wasn't really concerned too much because my father had been in the industry all his life, so I knew I could have backup information from him. So what I needed basically to do was to find a site. Once you've got a site and you know what the footprint of the ground is, you can decide on what type of a house you want to build. Yeah, we moved in 1947. Which there wasn't very much house building on because you needed to have licences for everything. You couldn't get timber, you couldn't get concrete, you couldn't get bricks, you couldn't get windows. So what you did was you got planning permission in those days and then you collected together whatever you could, second hand, new. I remember going to Blackpool to get the windows from a big store which had been made before. You had to have a cedar roof on because you couldn't get heavy enough timbers to put on another type roof. And the lightest roof you could get, which was guaranteed for about 50 years, was cedar shingles. Well, I was only 11 when we moved in, but I was sort of involved and mooching around. And Joan was in hospital. I had a miscarriage. So I was at home weaning Andrew onto a bottle. And when I got him put down at night, I was at a loose end. And so I started investigating about modern buildings and insulation and that sort of thing. All at a lesser standard than there is today, of course. But even so, I was by the time I'd done all that, I was way in front of the game. So I knew about fiberglass insulation. It recommended 1 inch at the time, so I doubled it to 2. I had solid floors because if you have solid floors, you don't need ventilation to keep the timbers from rotting. But then you've got a cavity which is the same air temperature as the grate outside, so although you've got 2 walls, you've only got 1 between you and inside. No trouble getting the water off. We teed off the water that went to his house. When we decided to build here, we could only decide to build here because they decided to get rid of the poultry and that the land then became available. What was built there was a row of, there's 3 farm cottages which fed out over a dyke onto Nicky Nacky Lane, and they had been changed into one big open space for deep litter poultry, and where the house is built now was all a straw yard which allegedly hens used to go outside to make them free range. But if you know enough about hens, you know that there isn't such a thing as free range. They just stand near where there's food, and if you don't give them enough they'll go and forage for some, but if they get enough they won't go outside. So once we got rid of the hens, we demolished the buildings, and then I measured up the plot, and once you know what the plot size is, you can decide what the footprint of the house is, because at that time for a habitable room you had to be 15 feet from your boundary, which is why the back wall of our house is 15 feet from our boundary, and it's 15 feet from that, and it's 15 feet from the front, and it's 15 feet from the side. So you're left with a bit in the middle which you can plonk a house or a bungalow or whatever you want. Basically it was going to build I was like stone built, and I was going to build it all in brick with the front being stone. And my dad liked he liked building in the stone, so we built a piece at the front first. Of course, you've a lot of work to do before you get to that stage with the concrete and all that to put in. And having built it about 3 foot high with stone at the front, he said, why don't we build it all in stone? I decided on that. Planning permissions weren't quite the same then as they were now. And he worked for the council. He was senior foreman and water inspector at the council. It was the time of Harold Wilson. The economy wasn't all that strong. Builders were going bust, left, right and centre. So I was going to builders' sales and buying stuff that I needed. And I bought a pile of timber on Hull Docks which had been damaged by fire. And there were 12 foot, 12 inches wide by 2.5 inches thick. And the joists that I needed them to be 6 by 2.5. So I got that saw and we ripped them all the timber in two, but a lot of it we couldn't use because this fire damage had burnt half at one side, had burnt it. And then I got windows from a friend who was a builder who was visiting at work, and I said, how much are windows? And he said, well, it depends what you want. And I told him they want to be double glazing. He said, oh, that's interesting, because at that stage nobody was using double glazing. Must have been, well, the first person I know that had double glazing. And we had the frames made for double glazing. I saw myself as being a builder at that time. I thought I could maybe have gone into building from what I was doing, but I enjoyed what I was doing so much. I just thought I was building a normal house up to modern standards with all modern ideas. Like, I couldn't believe when you read up about central heating. I mean, at that time, 1960s, central heating was only just coming in, and everything was going into radiators and wet systems, and they still are, and I just couldn't believe it. Because when you read it up worldwide, nowhere else goes in for all that business. Everywhere else uses warm air. And of course, what people don't realise is radiators aren't radiators, they're warm air heaters. They warm a room by convection from the air going round that. So why do you want a radiator? I'm picking a shovel, and bearing in mind it was been an old farmyard for 300 years, and every time that something had gone wrong, they put brick rubble down. And
did you find anything interesting?
Yeah, work. Just did that on a night. I used to come home from work, have my tea, and then come down for an hour and dig for an hour. It was almost exactly. We started work in February, and moved in May the year after. So just over a year. Poured the foundations, poured the floors. Sorry, we built the foundations. Put a row of brickwork on, the first row of brickwork, with damp-proof bricks, which are blue. You can see them round the outside. And then levelled the floors off the top of that brickwork with a board, and floated it all off. And so we had a big concrete pad down to start building.
As you grow up in the house, it's like, it's normal, isn't it?
Yeah.
But nobody else had a house you could run that.
No,
like
well, again.
Was that a design feature?
Again, that was a thing that I read. I read quite a lot of stuff. I mean, 90% of the heating of a house doesn't go through the ceiling, it doesn't go through the floor. It's the number of air changes you get. So if you get drafts and of air coming in and you leave doors open, that's it. So the whole house was controlled ventilation, no opening windows, controlled ventilation, so that I didn't have any drafts. And the other thing was, they said if you're going to have a hall in a house, you need to be able to get into every room if you can, from the hall. That's the purpose of it, if you think about it. and then you need to get into the lounge near the back door, another door into it from there. We did move the door from this corner actually to the other side. No, and I learned how to do my own drawings, and I'd been working in a drawing office at British Jeffrey Diamond. So these drawings you see before you will have been done in a dinner time on a drawing board at BJD. I did that. That's the only friction I had with my father and the joiner, who was he knew a joiner, a very, very good joiner. And I wanted to do the roof differently to tradition because I didn't want upstairs rooms to have T-falls in. You know what I mean? No? The T-falls, the corner slashed off.
Yeah.
So you've got a wall and a corner and then a room.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that. I wanted square, vertical rooms. And to do that, you had to go away from the traditional geo-triangular bits and pieces. So my roof and timberwork was all engineeringly designed as against. That was all that. And so my father didn't like the idea, and Bob the joiner didn't like the idea. But I stuck out and got my own way. I realised very early on, if you had central heating, you don't close doors. Yeah, of course I would.
What would you do different now?
Well, I spent money on in the front bedroom. There's an overhang. You know, you're aware of that, about a metre and a half of overhang, and that all had to be roofed. Obviously. So you're paying for something and you're not using the space inside the house. And that was done purely for the feature, because at that time in the 60s the vogue was sort of ranch type housing. And I'm not certain that I would build a dormer bungalow next time, because of the difficulty of insulation.
Next time.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, if I was talking to somebody and they were advising, they were saying, I like your house and I'm going to build one just like it, I'd say, build a house, don't build a dormer bungalow. Well, I had to move, haven't I? I moved from that house there, which is 50 yards away, to that bungalow there, which is 50 that way, and I've come in the middle. Surely that's far enough. I thought I might have to do for work at one time or another, but as it worked out, I got promoted where I was all the time. I built several in the village and round about.
I know you designed them, I didn't know as you built.
I actually built most of them. I built Peter Summers's not personally, I got people in that oversaw the bricklayers, and I did Keith Taylor's, Ray Goodrick. Exactly. I mean, the other thing is I've always been handy myself. I knew I could do the plumbing, I knew I could do the wiring. Only thing I really couldn't do to any sort of quality was plaster. And my father was an excellent bricklayer, and this guy that did the joinery was a good joiner. So he did the woodwork, and my dad did the brickwork, and I got involved in all the rest, really. I thought he'd done well. I couldn't imagine it not break. I carried it up a ladder, and I couldn't have got it on first step when we had to take it off.
Because it was so heavy?
And the trouble with that was that we reinforced it with old iron, and it rusted and cracked it all. Yeah.
Is there anything else like that's sort of...
Well, no, but the bit of the old Cawood railway line over the front windows, in that concrete joist over the front windows, got a bit of railway line in.
Railway line hasn't reinforced, you cast that, did you?
No, it's the railway line down the lane.
What do you mean then? It's an used metal as an RSJ?
No, it wasn't an RSJ, it was a railway line.
I know, but you use it instead of an RSJ.
Yes.
And that's inside that.
And that's inside there. So what we did was we built the brickwork up and built a wooden box up where the thing was going to be, with that moulded arch in, and then packed the railway line up on 2 pieces of brick at the end, and then filled it all full of cement. If you were building, if you're looking in books today to do a self-build, you'd be looking at timber frame, well insulated, with just a cladding on the outside of brick maybe, or something like that. The construction of the building would be totally different for insulating purposes, really. Plus the fact that with internal walls which are not load bearing and a timber, you can just move them around your whim if you want to change something. Things were different in those days, and I couldn't see anything I didn't manage. And of course I was visiting building sites on a daily basis, looking at builders, and it was just at that time that I was building mine that preformed trusses were coming in. And I saved an enormous amount of money by visiting these bankrupt builders' sales. I thought I'd paid £4 for a wheelbarrow and finished up owning 28. Lots of builders went bust under his regime. I mean, the staircase was built for another house, and I gave £3 for it. Well, in those days it would have been 100. And all the doors I bought at a sale for £4, 11 doors, paid them back. It actually cost an extortionate sum of £1,700. You have to have the right mindset. It's a good idea, but you have to know what you want. And I have the ability to look at a plan and see the building. And really I did it in reverse. I saw what building I wanted and did the plan. Well, I was on building sites all day long. But you could look at builders like Crowthers and you could see they were built for price. What can we do cheaper? So they weren't very good at all. Started at the front on the stone under the window, big window. We did that and then we took it all up. If you look, it's called Tudor Bond. So they're all different sized blocks. But every now and again, so that you finish up properly, you have a horizontal joint all the way around the house. So you would build maybe a metre all the way around, then put another, then it goes random and then you put another metre on. Most of the building was done on a weekend. But it wasn't slow, wasn't my dad? I mean, all I did was mix the sand and cement. And of course, with it being stone, it was lime. I can even remember today. It was 3 of lime, 1 of cement, and 4 of sand. And you had to be careful to get the sand from the same place, so you got the same colour, so when it dried, it all dried the same colour.
Did you have a cement mixer then? Did you mix it by hand?
Yeah, we called it a shovel. We bought an old cement mixer for maybe a tenner and flogged it for a tenner when we finished to somebody else. No JCBs came on sites or anything like that. 18 inches wide and a foot deep is the foundation. And then the floors sit on the inside of the brickwork, about 5.5, 6 inches, with a layer of visqueen in. So there's well, it'll be 6 inches. I'm fairly certain I remember it was 4 inches of sand and cement, then a layer of visqueen, and then 2-inch topping.